All right, so give me just a moment to finish getting everything set up and get the microphones set the way that I would like them to. Let's see, Discord is now listening, and I need to unmute in my ear so that you guys can all hear me. And then I need to mute this on Discord. Okay, check. Checking 1, 2, perfect. All right. Kat ema ai numeu ulte zolatn prute. It's my pleasure, and I'm super excited to welcome you back to another Notfi lesson. Now, ignore the intro to Notfi clauses thing over there on the right. I forgot to change that before we got started. But today, we're going to be talking about intransitive verbs in the Notfi language. So, brief recap on what we've talked about when it comes to verbs so far. When we have been looking at verbs, what we've been looking at is transitive verbs up to this point. And with this, we've been looking at two basic case endings that we use in order to get that desired, the sentences that we want to work with here. So, they are case endings for the subject of our sentence and case endings for the object of our sentence. Okay? So in transitive verbs, we have what we call the subject and object of the verb. The subject is the person or thing doing the action in the sentence, and the object is the person or thing that is being affected by the action in the sentence. So a good example of a verb like this is the verb ting, which is to give. It has somebody who's doing the giving, and it has a thing that's being given. And so those would be the subject and object of this verb. So for words, for nouns that end in a vowel, we have a consonant case ending. For nouns that end in a consonant, we have a vowel case ending. Those are L and il, I-L, I-L, respectively, for the subject of our verbs. For our object, we have the T-I case ending for words ending in vowels or consonants, and we have the IT case ending for words ending in consonants. So this one can be used for both. This one can be used only for nouns ending in consonants. We call these noun cases, and this is important as I'm getting into more about our verbs today. It's important to understand why we call them noun cases. It's because these endings will only ever go on a noun when we are using them, because we're trying to indicate roles of nouns in our sentence. In Notfi, we have what we call limited free word order, which means we can rearrange the words in our sentence in order to have them flow a certain way, in order to put the emphasis in a place that we want to put it. So, in a sentence like I give a book, we can have some ambiguity in Notfi in the word order if we don't take the time to indicate which nouns are doing what. So real simple, this is the last I'm going to recap on transitive verbs before I talk about the next type of verb and their two case endings that are more commonly seen with them, is to give you an idea of what this looks like. So very simple, even in English word order, we've got I give a book. So the subject of our sentence takes this case ending. That's I. This is I. We have the object of our sentence has this case ending, so that's going to be book. And then we have our verb give. Okay, so this is transitive verbs. With transitive verbs, you will potentially see all 5 of our noun cases used with transitive verbs. With intransitive verbs, you are only really going to see 3, and 2 of them we haven't talked about at all yet. So let's jump over to talking about intransitive verbs, and we're going to start with a verb that I think is pretty helpful for understanding this concept in Natfi, which is nume, which is to learn. So, here, let's turn this a little bit this way. There we go. So I've got a little bit more. So, early in the days of the Natfi language, KP took a lot of flack for taking what is traditionally a transitive verb in English and turning it into what we would call an intransitive verb in Natfi. Being as this is the way that he chose to do this, nume does not take a subject and an object in the way that we would expect it to in English. And so we have to get creative using our other noun cases in order to kind of work around the limitations of the language. So let's talk about our next 2, or let's talk about the more complex of the 2 noun cases that I'm going to bring up today, which is the topic. Okay. So when we have the topic of a sentence in Natfi, we're going to mark it with the case endings ri or iri. And essentially, you can think of a topic as a meta object. If you take the object level of a sentence and you branch it out broadly and you're setting context. So when you're talking about the thing that you're learning in Natfi, we're saying like big picture, it's weird. Big picture, the topic that you're learning or the thing that you're learning, and then you just do the verb, I learned. So let's just give you a sentence on how this is going to look like. I learned the Natfi language, okay? We're going to use our adjectives, litvia, and then this is going to take our topical case ending. So this is language. Now we need to make sure that we're specifying the Natfi language. So litvia le Natfi. And then subject, oe, and verb, nume. Okay, so litviare le Natfi oe nume is the way that we're going to say I learned the Natfi language in Natfi. What we have here is our core sentence, oe nume, I learned. And we have established the topic of our sentence over here with litviari le Natfi, which is the thing being learned, but due to the fact that intransitive verbs do not take an object, this is how we have to do it. So, context. Context for the sentence, what is being learned, and then the sentence itself, I learned. Don't worry if this is confusing for you at first. The topical clause is the topical case is one of the most difficult things that we can approach on an introductory level for Natfi learners. However, it's crucial to understanding the way that intransitive verbs work and how we can convey more information. So let's take another verb, because there's another one that we can use to indicate this, and we're going to talk about a new type of intransitive verbs. So let's jump and talk about the properties of intransitive verbs. When you're checking in a dictionary, you're going to see them marked as VIN as opposed to VTR, which is transitive. So VIN, verb intransitive, VTR, verb transitive. We are working with verb intransitive when we're talking about intransitive verbs, and there are 2 types. There are ones like nume, which are standalone verbs, and the only way that you're going to know that they are intransitive is by looking at a dictionary. Okay. The other way that you can tell a verb is intransitive is if it is paired with the particle see. Okay. See is a verb of its own that we don't actually use it on its own, but it's a verb maker. It's a verb maker that basically means to do or to make. So you will sometimes see paired with a noun to create what we would call a see verb. And see verbs are always intransitive in their base forms. So our next word that we're going to use to discuss this idea of intransitive verbs is going to be the verb for help in not be, which is, and I'm going to write it right here, strung see. So, strung see, to help, is intransitive and not be. If we want to specify what we are helping with, then that's going to need the topic, because unlike in English, it's an intransitive verb, and so we have to use the topic to set the context for what help is being given. So I'm just going to take simple, I help with work, and we'll get into the who or what here in just a second, because it segues really nicely into our next noun case. So, te kan kim ngk eri oe strum si. Okay, so I help with work. That's the basic meaning of this sentence. We have the context set by the topical noun here, and then we have the rest of the sentence os rumsi as the what's being done. So I help. Now, the fourth noun case, other than the possessive, which we talked about when we talked about adjectives in lesson 2, is what we would call the dative. We're going to come down here. This is the dative, and it marks recipient of an action or thing. Okay, recipient of an object or recipient of an action, and it's nouns that are in the dative case take the case endings r, optional u, ru, or or you are, depending on whether or not they end in a vowel or consonant. If you haven't picked up the trend yet, the case endings that start with a consonant are the ones that finish a vowel word. The case endings that start with a vowel are the ones that end a consonant word. This is to preserve Notfi's vowel, consonant, vowel flow in its word structure. So, just to show you practically how this works, in our sentence, I help with work, okay? I'm actually going to do two things. I'm going to show you how the possessive would work in this sentence, and I'm going to show you how the dative would work in this sentence. And to do this, I am going to clear the board real quick. So if you're taking notes, I'm going to give you just a moment's pause while I check the chat to see what Yana is saying, to copy down any information that you need, and then we will move on. So I'm going to step over here. Sentence. I help you with work. I'm going to actually change this to be I help you with your work. Okay, that way I can demonstrate the possessive as we're going through this. So we got our core sentence. Te kan Kim, iri, oe, srun, si. Okay? If we want to say, I help you with your work, okay? The way that we say, I help you, okay? The help is being given to somebody. They are receiving the help. This is where the dative is going to come into play. Our word in not fee for you is nga. And so, really simple, just like our other nouns that we have been working with case endings so far. We take nga and we add our case ending ru to it to mean to you. So, I do help to you. I help you. Okay? Now, the possessive, if we want to change it to be your work, we need to provide ownership of the work itself. Our case endings for possession are a for all consonants plus o and u, okay, and ya for all other vowels, so a, e, a, e, and I. So your work. Oh, and this is gonna. Well, yeah. Okay. I've gotta dive into this because this is going to open up a can of worms. On the second and third person pronouns, so that is nga, you for second person pronoun, and po, them for third person pronoun. You're going to have some morphology in the word when you are adding the possessive suffix, the possessive case ending. So the vowels at the end, the a and the o, they are going to shift to an e. This is just a rule of not fee. It's something that you have to learn. I could get into the deeper reasons why, but honestly I would even have to refresh them for myself if I was going to understand them. So, it's not ngaya. Sorry, ngaya or poya. These are both wrong. Okay? It's going to be ngaya or paya. So, now that I've thoroughly opened up that can of worms, we are going to modify tekankim to say that it is your work. We are going to add, actually, we're not going to add it first. We're going to have to move tekankim because the noun that has the topical case ending will always come first in its clause. So, tekan, iri, ngeya, ngano. And that is our sentence meaning, I help you with your work. All right. One more thing to unpack on this before I open the floor for questions on these two things. You may have noticed I put the possessive noun, the one that's in the possessive case, behind the noun that is modifying. And for those who missed the lesson on this, that's because the possessive noun can go on either side of the noun that is modifying and still make sense. There is some ambiguity here in whether or not Ngeya could modify Oe or Tekankim. contextually, it makes more sense for this one to be correct and not this one. But if there's ever any ambiguity by that, or with that, you could simply break up the sentence in a different way. In this case, the one that would make the most sense to me would be to move ngaru between ngea and oe. It can get a bit complicated, so I'm not going to really get into that at this point. So if you're listening along or if you're watching in the chat, now is an excellent point to drop some questions on the two case endings, noun case endings that we've added for use with intransitive verbs. I'll give a nice little pause here and allow those questions to be shared. So let's do two things real quick. I want to recap all 5 of the noun cases because we have covered all 5 now. And just, again, really briefly run through each of their purposes and what they're for. And then I want to tell you which ones can be used with which type of verb. Because there's some that you would expect with one type of verb and some that you would expect with another type of verb. But there are some that won't work with one of the types of verbs. So let's clear this real quick. So, subject. We have ill object. We have T, optional E, and eat. Possession. We have and yeah. Dative. We have would. Not that one, sorry. We're doing constant first. Root or would. And topic. We have ri or iri. Hey, there's a question. A bit confused about the peya example. In the possession ending chart you read above, weren't words at the end O supposed to take an A ending to indicate possession and not yet? But not why the ending is the one that it is. Okay, so yes. Except, so what the question is, if I'm understanding correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is why isn't it poa instead of what would be, or what, the base would have been poya? And that is an excellent question. If it weren't for the fact that this vowel morphs with the possessive ending, which happens before the ending is used, then this would actually be correct. But because when it morphs, it becomes pet, then we have to use the case ending in order to conform to the rules of Navi. And so it becomes peya instead of poa or pea, because this would be, which breaks the rules. So consistently, a way to remember this, all we expect from certain verbs and certain ones that we don't expect from certain verbs. So here's how you remember this. With verb transitive, transitive verbs, all 5 cases can be used. Perfect. With intransitive verbs, you are only ever going to see 3 of these noun cases, and I'll tell you what they are. Only 3 cases are good. They are the topic, the dative, and the possessive. Logically, this makes sense, but I want to talk through it for the people who maybe don't quite understand why yet. When we are talking about intransitive verbs, they do not have an object. So that strikes our object from the possibility of being used with intransitive verbs at all. Okay? You will never see a eat or a t case ending with a intransitive verb. The only time the subject case ending needs to be used is when there is an object. So, if there is no object case marking, then there is no subject case marking, which is why you will never see the subject case marking with intransitive verbs. The subject is unmarked with intransitive verbs. That rule holds true for transitive verbs, because transitive verbs can be used intransitively. They don't need to take an object in order for them to make sense. If you wanted to say I know in Natfi, the verb for that is omum. If you don't specify what you know, if you just wanted to say I know, you don't need to say well omum, it's just oe omum. And that is that when it comes to noun cases in Natfi verbs. Now, let's take a second here. Let's go to questions. Let's start with questions relevant to what we've been discussing today, either in the chat or in the voice chat. You guys are welcome to do that here on the Discord. And then we will move to any lingering questions that you would like to see talked through or discussed up here on the whiteboard. Hey, 1 second. There we go. I just noticed my ears haven't been in the channel, so I apologize if you guys have been talking. I should have been able to hear you in my ear. Anyways. All right. There was somebody typing in the Discord, so I will wait for just a second to see what they have for us. Before I wrap for today. Let's see. I hope you're healthy. I want to say I hope you're healthy physically, but I am unsure exactly what word I should use for health. Okay. This one is an easy question. I'm going to copy and paste that over into the stream chat just so that it is there for posterity. Let's talk about this one here. I'm going to erase this. It's been up for enough time now. So, a little bit more complex of a sentence, uses some constructions in NUFI that we might not have covered yet or might not have been learned yet. I hope we have silpe. That's our verb for hope. Silpe oe. My preference is to put oe after silpe. And then silpe is a type of verb that we call a sniff verb, which means that it has a like a clausal transition word. This word right here means that, but it's a clausal transition for specific types of verbs. So I hope that, and then this is where we're going to get into the core of our sentence, which is that you are healthy. And we want to say, basically what we want to say to you is health. You have health. And to do that, we're going to say ngaru. So we just talked about that one. Nga taking the dative ending. Lu, which is the be verb in NUFI. And our word for physical bodily health is pomtok, which is FPOMTOKX. So, I hope that you are healthy. Alternatively, and because this is a little fun tidbit, we have a verb that means to be well, and that can be health, that can be physical, that can be just general wellness, and it's zo. And you could say, before I get jumped on by the I sne verbs will always cause the verb in the clause coming after it to be in the, what we would call the subjunctive. So, ngaru, livu, or livu. There is a infix, and we will get into infixes in a future lesson, so don't worry if you don't quite understand what's going on right there. Ngaru livu, pomtok. So, because it's a hope, because it's a wish, something that might not actually be the case, it takes the subjunctive. We'll get into the subjunctive case in a future lesson about the subjunctive tense, when we get into a future lesson about our infixes in NUFI. So, another way though of saying this, we have sil, pe, or sne. And then using the topic, we're going to set the topic of our intransitive verb zo. And we're going to say ngari. And we're going to say everything, which is fraku. And everything is well. So, ngari fraku so. Either of these works as an example. There we go. Alrighty. I think that about wraps us for today. As always, if you have any lingering questions, I would be happy, and there are other Aiharu on standby in the Learn NUFI Discord to answer those questions for you. The link, if you are, for whatever reason, watching this or coming to this late, for the Discord is in the bottom left corner down there, discord.me/learnnotfee. But that's about all I've got time for today. So, hope you enjoyed this lesson. We'll see you next week, back hopefully at our 3 p.m. normal time block, and we will be covering some more complex topics in NotFee. Hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday, and I will see you all around.